and joy and kind of connecting people to the learning experience. And it's a position that depends on funding, not always possible. When possible, it really makes a difference because it's intimidating for many people to be in a garden. So in my role as a garden educator, I work on lowering that intimidation and figuring out how to welcome people into gardens.
That's great, thank you. Alicia, anything else to add or good?
I'll just say that with both Carolina and Aziza, I'm a community partner in this process. So, you know, with Aziza, I coordinated with her and brought seeds that from the communities that I work with and some of the seeds that they save from the plants that are culturally significant. And so just taking that little barrier away to seed access of some of these other seeds that might be harder to come by. And that was part of Aziza's vision and some other people from the outdoor committee to make sure that the garden was growing to include plants that represent the places and the foods of the students that are in that school. And so I sort of came in as a community partner in that way to support that growing of the cultural piece of the garden. And now, you know, to echo both of them, just the team part of it, and that Carolina and I are now working together as well on a different project, but the partnerships team, whatever you want to call them, are key. And we live in a great state for partnerships. So there's a lot of resources out there and a lot of people who are happy to step in and support these kinds of things.
Absolutely, and I'll put a plug in too for the Vermont Farm to School Network, and that's a really highly networked group of folks there that are also really able to help step in and at least connect you with other folks that are doing the great work. All right, thank you. So does anyone want to share their favorite, garden-based activity or program or kind of experience that you've had there, and maybe that connects folks to the local community or the cultures there? I don't know, Alicia, if you want to head it off.
Well, since the people that I work with, the gardeners, I work with about 300 gardeners at our state in total on about 9 acres of land. So the activities might look a little different than they do in a school garden, but nonetheless can be interesting. We're interested in, and this is something I'm working on with Carolina right now, just in terms of documenting different things that are happening in the garden. And I think this could apply to students as well, but doing photo voice projects where people are taking pictures of plants or taking pictures of something they eat at home and then doing a voiceover. And that's something that when we're working with different languages, to have people to be able to speak in their own language and describe something, and then I can work with interpreters to have that translated and all of that. But it helps people to share their story of why this plant is, what medicinal purposes do people get out of that plant? What part of the body does it help? Why do they eat that? What is the significance? When do they eat it? Do they eat it at a celebration? Is it only at this kind of celebration and not that kind of celebration? So that's, I don't think it's any age, anybody can do that kind of thing, because I think obviously like everyone eats, and but it's interesting when you can hear that, especially in the program I work with, from the elders who have a history with that plant and that food from their childhood. So I don't know if that's
great. That's amazing. I was just thinking how cool it would be to get those elders and those stories and then share them within a school that maybe would want to grow something like that and things like that. I love that use of technology too. It's fantastic. Yeah, Aziza, anything to add to that?
Sure. The thing that pops into my mind is that for many years now, we've been using the Vermont Harvest of the Month program within our schools. So each month we have a featured crop that we use, and We've been using that to base off we cook in the cafeteria with our school chef, and then we also had a person who came to our classrooms and cooked individually with classes through the winter months. So we've been using that model for many, many years. And then a couple of years back, we started integrating more indigenous crops into our garden, and we're experimenting with indigenous recipes, and we're doing a lot of curriculum work around that. And so we had added a lot of Abenaki culture within our school and then into the gardening program itself. And then we started, Alicia's a parent in our school, and we started talking about New Farms for New Americans, and we have a really large refugee population in Burlington. We were like, you know, we really would love to start to incorporate all of our student population from, you know, Abenaki all the way to our newest Americans within our gardening and cooking programs. So for the last year or so, we've been working on transforming our garden into incorporating seeds, you know, that span all of that. And then we also used the model of the Vermont Harvest of the Month, and we created a cookbook called Celebrating Our Roots. That's really modeled totally on exactly what they have, where it's you get information about different culturally significant crops, where they come from. We based it all off of where our students came from. And then they include recipes, educational activities, ideas. So, you know, COVID kind of has sideswiped a lot of our rolling out of it, but we have started cooking. We've cooked like 2 or 3 of the recipes this year after many, many months of waiting. And it's been really, really exciting. And we can't wait to keep continuing to build that and get more recipes from our school community, start to build in maybe things like the videos that Alicia was talking about, and really starting to try to really have those recipes and our plants in the garden as well, really sourced and representative of who we have in our community. So that's one really exciting thing.
That's fantastic. And we've Lindsay put the link to the cookbook there in the chat. So check it out. The recipes look great. Like it's a really awesome little resource.
Yes, it's definitely still in draft form. I'll put that out there right there. So it's a work in progress. And then we're really thinking of it as a frame that we want to really, you know, have it continually evolve and change and reflect our community. So if anyone wants, I have an editable version as well. If they want it for their own communities, I'm always happy to share that with people if they want to email me.
Excellent, thank you. Carolina, what's your favorite activity to connect with the community? Because you do a lot of that.
It's hard to narrow it down, but I've been appreciating gardens for what they offer us beyond like the perimeter of the garden, in the sense that one of the projects that I think of that I've really enjoyed learning more about is we did a lot of work with affordable housing sites and with summer programming. So those kind of off months if you're in a school context, or the on months if you're a summer camp director. And at one housing site out in Barrie, there was a lot of interest. The folks who ran the program had a big background in herbalism. And so I think it was after a few years of kind of focusing the garden program on the summer harvest, what you can do, there arose an interest in the winter months and how can we extend what is happening in the garden into the winter months. Kids were interested, mothers, fathers, other family members interested. And so they began a whole winter wellness based around herbalism. And I found that just the connections that were made on the garden grows during these months, but what the garden grows and what we can take from the garden, we can then continue learning in the winter. And so they have really interesting reports on, fun sounding activities like spa day in the middle of the winter with herbs from the garden, healing teas, how to work with kind of lower energy, slower digestive systems in the winter. And it was all garden based, but happening in the winter and bringing together families, kind of this intergenerational aspect that I also thought was really interesting. And I tend to be a big supporter of thematic gardens, of kind of a project-based kind of dives into the garden world. And in many projects that I've been involved in, whether it's herbalism or cooking, tend to be kind of ways to expand what goes on in the garden and bring people together of different ages, of different backgrounds, and beyond the growing season. So a little broad example here, but.
I love it. I'm ready for Garden Spa Day. Sign me up. That sounds awesome. Excellent. anything else, I think we can go on to our next question. We rapidly run out of time here. Great. And so our other question here is, how has knowledge from BIPOC gardeners and leaders, including New Americans, influenced your gardens and enhanced learning? I know that's kind of a big question, but I won't call on anyone because this seems like a hard one. But if anyone wants to go first, that would be great. You're all muted. Am I gonna have to call on someone?
I can start.
Right.
So I guess I would say that, you know, we definitely couldn't be creating our garden without our community. So from everything from, especially Alicia has helped us connect to get those hard to find seeds. You know, we've gotten a lot of seeds also from our Abenaki elders, and then also from the New American community, and the knowledge, the seeds, the gift that they're giving us when they share those things with us and sharing their culture with us has just been incredible. So I think that's just been amazing. Like whenever you can get to the source and whenever you can get, you know, that really authentic connection is always great. And then I would also add just that connection for students means the world too. You know, when a student can see someone that maybe looks like them, or there's a food that they connect to that they had never seen before in school. One of the things that really kind of got me on this path was one day I brought in chai. We made chai in my class, and then like it's from my family's from India, and we have this recipe that we use, and we were drinking it in the class. But then one of my Somali students was like, "This is exactly what I drink at home," and he was so excited, like over the moon excited. Came in the next day with his bags of Lipton tea, and you know was ready to go to make some more the next day. And I was like, wow, you know, like that meant so much for him to see it there. I wanted to be able to have that for all my students. So I think the more you can do that, the more kids are able to see themselves, the better.
Love that. Alicia, you want to jump in?
Sure. So I would just say that, you know, what Aziza is saying as well is that the farm gardeners that I work with, I mean, they are really the educators in so much of the garden. It's that knowledge that people already have. I mean, these were subsistence farmers before they came. They're trying to recreate a life, a memory, and provide for their family. And so first and foremost, it's like, okay, I go into the garden, and the program is such that they're really they're leading the way in terms of how we shape the garden, and they're providing feedback, and I'm really just there to support their initiatives and their ideas. But granted, all of those ideas require funding, and that's also, you know, that falls on me to make sure that I can support those kinds of things. But it's also just been this really interesting journey for them as well as me, as we all work together to figure out where the garden will go, and that there's no perfect garden, there's no perfect vision, that it evolves, as Aziza was saying at the beginning, like the garden evolves and it evolves together, and that you get it wrong a lot too, and that is part of the process. I mean, there's so many times where I can say that we all didn't get the vision quite right, or you know, we had to go back and start over again, and that's okay. You always have next season. And when the field floods and everyone says, oh well, it flooded again, and I'm devastated, and you know, they're devastated too, they've lost a lot of crops, but at the same time, it's just recognizing that sometimes things are out of our control. So and it's, you know, it's nice to think that we can provide that when we go down there, like there's always an interest on, we need to learn how to grow food in Vermont in this very short season, because soon the snow will come. It's this big dreadful moment when that snow comes and the season stops. But and that's where part of, through these surveys and feedback and everything, that to say like, okay, well, what can we do to help them grow food longer through the winter, to know that this can be this is a year-round experience. So, in terms of just like how it's influenced, I mean, our whole garden is influenced by the life and of the farmers themselves, but it's also just making sure that they know that they're also, even though that this program is here to support them, that they have a voice in the project as much as everybody else. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I went off on a tangent.
No, that was great. That makes total sense. And I love the idea of they're really the teachers in this situation, and that you just kind of get them the resources they need to spread that information. And that's fantastic. Carolina, you have anything else?
Yeah, I would add that I think a garden and farming and food production is yet another sphere of life that we're taking a more critical look at now, and thinking of who has access to land. Are there inequities in access to land? Who produces our food? So much of our food are produced by Black and brown skinned people. And gardens are an introduction to learning more about that. I find that sometimes the garden is less about how many pounds of vegetables did you produce, especially in the scale that I'm at, where people have a raised bed or a small backyard garden, or they rent a small plot. Yes, we strive to produce food to can for the winter, but it's an introduction to the process of how food is produced. And when you dive into that world, I find that there's a lot to unpack there. And many times I find that the storytelling of whose land are we even growing food on, who grew food here before, when I know big terms like permaculture, there's a lot of interest in permaculture design that is based in indigenous ways of growing food. So I think whether it's kind of new things happening in the agricultural world, a lot of the times they're all rooted in people who grew food in this land thousands of years ago. And I think it offers a space for reconnecting with what our ancestors grew, where our food comes from, what does my neighbor eat that I don't eat that maybe I can learn from seeing in their garden what they're growing. So I think I think it's a welcoming space to just talk about big issues and figure out what brings us together. I think if we go back to the most basic, is food in many cases brings us together.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's very leveling. Like it just, we all need to eat, and it's a very commonality here. So we have like 2 minutes before we head into questions. So does anyone want to give like each of you could maybe give like one quick tip maybe for your garden planning or funding or something like that?
I'll start and just give a shout out we are currently running a workshop with my colleague Libby. It is called Community-Based Garden Organizing. I believe she's running another series in the next month, but it is basically a 4-week-long, 1-day-a-week webinar on how to plan your garden project. And I think the biggest takeaway there is it takes planning, it takes time. There's many different moving pieces, whether it's the fundraising, the volunteers, the maintenance. And so just out of seeing the need and the interest that folks have in starting up gardens, that's something that we've been putting together specifically for this year. And I'm happy to send that in the resources that'll be sent to participants at the end of this, in case anyone is interested in joining the next round of that training for garden organizers.
I can go. I would also highly recommend connecting with Vermont Community Garden Network for sure. They've gotten us lots of grants. They've gotten us tons of resources, seeds, all sorts of things. They are the people to go to for sure. And then I also highly recommend that Vermont Farm to School Institute. I think that's also phenomenal for building that team. And number one thing, build your team. Don't try to do it all on your own. Enlist the help of buildings and grounds, your cafeteria, your community members, your PTO, your administration. When you got a team, it makes everything much easier.
I'll just add one more thing to that is that even in winter, for all of this, this is still a part of the gardening world. Like everyone's still working, even though things are not necessarily growing. So when planning the garden, to know that you still have to be working in the winter and during the summer break, that those two time periods are crucial to the success of a garden, not just when everyone's in school, because it is true that like building a team of people to take care of the garden during the summer is a hefty task. And then being ready to start the garden, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. So give yourself the winter to start putting it together.
Excellent. All right, I think we're going to be heading into questions. So I don't know, Lindsay and Nicole, we're curating some questions from our group. If you have burning questions, put them in the Q&A.
Yeah, we actually, oh, our first question came in just now. Great.
The question that just popped up was, how do we get more information about the gardening series? We will definitely pass that along in the resource list in the follow-up email. I have a question related to the last question. In our town, when we used to have a more active community garden through the summer, that we sometimes had an event to try to kick off volunteer participation, as well as a little kiosk where people could sign up when they worked in the garden. So another person who had signed up might know exactly what they did without having to call them on the phone. Then we also tried to sometimes have like a overlap with the end of the school year to kick that off, have some kids and families show up on a Saturday for a little outdoor event with some fun snacks to try to encourage volunteerism in the summer. You know, we don't have an active garden right now in our community that ties to the school in the summer, but I'm curious what specific tools or like events or sign-ups, how do you recruit the people for the garden in the summer?
Carolina, you want to get that one, or Aziza?
I can talk about what we do at Champlain. So we have a core group of people who are part of that team that I was talking about earlier that we call the outdoor committee, because we kind of do lots of different things, including the garden. So that really starts there, and we meet once a month. This year it's been a little spotty because of our regulations around meetings, but typically we meet once a month, and that includes parents on there. So we have one person on that team who is our garden coordinator, who's a parent volunteer, and she really takes on the bulk of coordinating the volunteers. So like she has the overall vision of what's being planted. We have a whole garden plan and everything, but I think having that one person who kind of has like the big picture of everything is really important. And then through the years, we have gotten our food service is now giving us a person who comes to weed for a couple hours every week. So that's been really super helpful for just like someone to come in and just put in that time for that. And then we have parents sign up on a weekly basis for watering. So that's kind of how we stagger it. And then we really, really focus on fall crops more than anything. Like we don't plant a lot of stuff that's going to be harvested in the summer because there aren't people around. But if you're a parent who's, you know, watering, you can definitely harvest while you're there. But we really heavily focus on fall bearing crops for sure. We also are tied in through City Market. They have a member worker program. So if you volunteer in the gardens, you get a discount on groceries, which that's been a really nice, you know, way to say thank you to people who are putting that time in as well.
Well, that's helpful. And one resource I've been involved with is the Extension Master Gardener Program through UVM. Sometimes, well, there's required volunteer hours if you choose that track of the UVM Extension program as a Master Gardener. So sometimes if you can partner with someone in that network, then they can help with the summer gardening as well.
I have heard though that it's like there's some pretty specific requirements around that one where you have to be doing some kind of educational interaction, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that though, because we have looked into master gardeners before and it didn't work for us.
Well, it just depends on the person. So, but I think if you have educational goals over the summer, like if there's a camp at the school or nearby for a community garden, that's a great way to do that. Or the education component can be simple. You know, it's just a matter of coming up with a good plan with that person, I think, and writing it out so that's a big part of the mission is education for that program. Now we've had some questions about winter activities, so we can switch to winter. How do you get the students still excited about the gardens in the winter? One reply was calendula cream ties into a spa day. So it could be, we could talk about winter activities with the garden that have to do with students or community.
I know Alicia had started to talk about just all the planning that happens in the winter, and planning can be really fun. Whether it's planning for the seeds that you're starting or garden designs, kind of that dreamy phase. I've spent a lot of time mapping out gardens with people of all ages. If folks are very interested in kind of the digital world, there's some great garden design programs. GrowVeg is my favorite. You can move around little vegetables and pull them, and then you fill up garden beds. So if folks are very interested in kind of the digital learning, that is something to do over the winter. Seed starting, I think definitely I would encourage folks to dive into that world if you're needing seeds. Promotional advertisement here that VCGN, we have a seed bundle donation program. So you can send us a request and we will send you, I believe, 35 seed packets. We'll send out that information as well. And then, yes, I think there was reference to calendula. Kind of the herbalism world, I find, is definitely something that you can explore in the winter. And herbs in particular tend to be plants that are very low maintenance. So if your garden is struggling in the maintenance department, if you start with a thematic herb garden, maybe focusing more on perennials, many of them will survive a neglected summer. And if you're in a school setting, students come back in the fall, and many of those plants will be at their peak time to harvest. You harvest and store away, dry away those herbs, and then you have something to work with joyfully over the winter months. So I think in many ways, kind of the thinking about what can the garden give you that you can then do at other times of the year that happen to be also low maintenance plants, I think in my world are kind of key plants to keep track of. If I had to choose my favorite, I would say lemon balm. Lemon balm in my gardens, stellar, easy to grow, good for all ages, delicious in tea.
I'll also add, it's really fun to just grow stuff from compost. Like we do this of sprouting carrot tops on the windowsill or putting that little scallion end, and watching and seeing grow. And that's a really kind of fun thing to do, to kind of growing vegetables from your refuse, I guess, is really, and that can be done on your windowsill any time of year as well. And also microgreens and sprouting, those are really fun things. You can make microgreens on your windowsill with kids and then trim them up and have a little snack, and it's fun as well. Excellent. We see one more question here.
It's about how do we begin to know about the land we are on? This seems like such a large idea. What was your journey in maybe getting to, I think we were talking earlier about how that's something that can be started as a conversation in the garden. Were there any specific journeys as a class or with a group of students in figuring it out or understanding it in more depth? The history of the land, we're talking about more serious conversations related to land, ancestral land.
One thing I'll say is that plants have a lot to teach us, and sometimes, many times, the plants that are growing there for a reason. Whether they've been plants that have grown on that land for years and years, and you consider them a weed, and indigenous people to this land consider them medicine. I think paying attention to what is growing there and knowing the story of certain plants. There's one that I'm thinking of, plantain. It's a common weed. It's in pretty much every garden, lawn, and back in the day, it was referred to as white man's foot because it was a weed that spread during colonization as white folks came over to the Americas and started spreading seeds along with colonialism. Stories like that, when you really look at the landscape around you, looking around, like when the garden floods, what river is this? What did other people do when the land flooded here? Were there ways of growing food that were resilient to flooding? I think kind of like natural phenomenon and the stories behind plants, whether they're introduced, native, invasive, I think the land has a lot to tell us. So that'd be my 2 cents on how to learn from the land, listen to the land.
I would agree with that as well. And one thing, over the last few years, we've been working with Judy Dow, who's a local Abenaki educator, and she has been teaching us all about her traditional ecological knowledge. So we were doing some work around land acknowledgements in our school district. And she created a whole set of teachings for us around walking the land of each of our schools and just really learning about each of those plants, like what Carolina was talking about. So stuff you might have just walked right past that you didn't understand the cultural significance of until, you know, she taught us. And so I think getting that knowledge and seeking that out has really changed my view of things, and then being able to share that with students has been really incredible as well. And that really led to some deep learning. We did our land acknowledgement sign, and we actually dug clay we have a little brook running by our school, and then we imprinted native plants in the sign along with our land acknowledgement. And it just felt this, like the sign itself is like of the earth, the plants are in it, and then we like scattered the plants in a little ceremony at the end, and it just really felt like it connected us in this really incredible way that I would have never even dreamt of had I not gotten that learning from her. So it's all there, it's just a matter of being able to see it.
Beautiful, thank you. Anything else to add to that question? I have one last question for you guys. What is your favorite thing to grow and why?
I can start. My favorite thing to grow at school with the kids, I was reminded when Carolina was talking, is peppermint tea. So I've been doing that since I started at school, and it was the one thing that survived year after year after year. And not this year, unfortunately, but every other year I have students bring in a mug, and we have tea on Fridays while during our reading time. So we have like a little sipping peppermint tea. It's like the most fun thing ever. We collect tons and tons of peppermint. It grows like a weed because it just spreads and spreads and spreads. And then, you know, just most kids had no idea, like that's how tea is made. It's from leaves, and we let it dry, we crunch it up, and then we have our stash for the whole year. And it's just this really amazing thing to have that, and have that really nice cozy time all through the winter. And they just absolutely love it. And it's super easy.
That's so great. Alicia, what's your favorite?
As a mom, I'll say that it's got to be anything that you can dig up. So potatoes, carrots, all of those things are the best because it's just like a treasure chest underneath the soil of how big, how many, how small. So all of that. I did want to add one other thing to the gardens in terms of starting with a sort of pretty low level, but with the herbs, as Carolina was saying, and a connection to that would be at Champlain Elementary, they have a sensory garden. So it's all just plants that are meant to be smelled and touched, and that you know, a full array of senses, and those are pretty easy to grow. And so it's a nice activity, and you can have plants low to the ground for the kindergartners, and it can be accessible to all children. And I've really enjoyed seeing that there. It also makes a really nice place for people to play with fairies inside of the pretend fairies inside of the herb garden, the sensory garden. Anyway.
I love it. Carolina, how about you?
How fun to go last. I just went through so many plants that I could say. I'm gonna end on ground cherries. If you're not familiar with them, it's like a burst of tropical fruit that can grow in Vermont. It's an indigenous crop to this land. They look like tomatillos, so tomato family, solanum family. They're small, yellow. They come in their own husk. So I always talk about them as being candies that come in their own husk. Really easy to grow, and they're just thrilling. I feel like to have fruit in the garden is such a luxury. Easy growing fruit, and they have their own little wrapper, and you just open them up and pop one in your mouth, and it is divine, pineapple like mango flavored deliciousness. So everyone should have a ground cherry in their garden, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. They're like garden sweethearts. I love them. Yes. So I'll hand this back over to Lindsay. This is fantastic. Thank you.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited about, I don't really have a green thumb myself, but this was, makes me want to get out there and get in the garden. So a couple of things before we say goodbye to everyone. I want to let you all know that Vermont Education and Environment Network, we are a membership-based organization, and we are committed to providing resources like these webinars for our members, and we are constantly cultivating a stronger and growing membership. So if membership within our network is something that sounds interesting to you, I hope that you'll check out our website and consider joining. We have different tiers, even a free level of membership, all the way up to sponsorships. And there are a myriad of benefits involved with each tier of membership. So I hope you'll consider joining us. And we also have vacancies on our board. So if you are committed to driving this work forward in Vermont, I hope that you will check out our website and join us. All right. And there are mini grants. There's a mini grant opportunity I want to share with you all, up to $1,000. So if you are a K-12 teacher who is in the Lake Champlain Basin, you can apply for a mini grant that can be used for materials that will aid in teaching students about Lake Champlain watershed issues such as microscopes or waders, and applications are accepted on a rolling basis. And I am not doing my due diligence right now to put this information in the chat to share with you, but you'll all receive it all in a follow-up email that I'll get out probably tomorrow. And let's see. Oh, we'll get over that. Our next webinar is in March. This is World Water Day, the value of water. And we typically have our webinars in the evening so that classroom teachers can join us. But we are hopeful that classroom teachers will join this webinar with their students. And I will get, let's see, some more information on that for you all to check out in the follow-up email. I'll put the link in and you can sign up for that. And what else do we have next? Please find us on social media and connect with us. We are Education VT. We are across all your favorite platforms, and I hope that you will connect with us and join us in the future for upcoming webinars, membership, or maybe join our board. And at 5:01, I think we did pretty well today. Panelists, thank you so much. Beth, thank you. Nicole, thank you for your help in the chat. And thank you all for your great questions. And I hope to see you at another webinar. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you so much, panelists. It was great to hear your stories.
Thank you, everyone.